I was between colleges and I needed a job. So I got a job at a sporting goods store. It was basically a family-run business. And they'd been in business since like 1890. They started off in the work clothes business back when you worked, 7 days a week. And then the business had evolved into sporting goods and into firearms. They didn't own firearms themselves, but they sold them. And so I learned a lot about that. But the long and the short of it is, they knew a lot about how to run business, and they'd been in business a long time, and that knowledge had been passed from generation to generation. I tell Chris a story. At the time, there was a war going on, as generally there is in America, and people wanted to send Smith & Wesson revolvers to their sons, at that time just sons who were fighting in combat. And an old-time customer came into the store. I remember, and Meyer, the man who owned the store, he said, I have one left, and let's say it's $175. And the customer said, $175, I can get that down at Guns R Us for like $120. Meyer said, great. And instead of arguing with the customer, Meyer always carried some cash with him. And he gave the customer like $500 in cash. And he said, pick me up 3 of them when you're down there, because they're selling them for less than I pay for them from Smith & Wesson. The guy said, okay, and he left. About an hour later, he comes back. I should add, the guns were rare at that time. They were hard to get. And Meyer said, well, where are my guns and where's yours? He said, well, they were all out. They're sold out. They don't have any. And Meyer said, if I was sold out, I'd sell them for $120 too, which basically is an important lesson, because, many of you that are, watching or listening or reading, you're in businesses where people always tell you're charging too much and they can get it elsewhere. And what I learned from Meyer is, if they can get it elsewhere, let them go. Either they're not telling you the truth, or they're not the kinds of people you want to do business with. And that's an important lesson. And Chris and I have talked about that over the years, and I know that he tries to help the people in the future learn that lesson. And it's a difficult lesson to learn, because you're always tempted to take whatever you can get now. Meyer would always say, I'd say, well, how could you turn the sale down? He said, there'll be another customer coming along. We've been here since 1894. We're not worried about the next customer. That's a hard lesson to learn if you're new in business. Fear is a huge issue in business and in people's personal life. I mean, it is an enormous issue. It is probably the biggest issue, and at some point we'll probably discuss that. But you have to have your business in some perspective. And let's face it, there are times when you're running a small business where you just need the cash flow, so you take the money. I'm not talking about that. I'll give you a better example. I work for a big company that supplies cameras and such to the motion picture, advertising, and television industry. We had enough gear. In those days, it was 35 millimeter cameras, basically, film cameras. We had enough gears to do 4 television shows. Let's say that the average show we got $25,000 to $30,000 a week for the gear, for the rental of all the gear. So what would happen is, after we rented the first 3 sets of gear we had, we would panic. And the next person that came along and wanted to pay 20, let's say, or sometimes even less actually, we would do it. Then, of course, what happens is, as soon as you rent that piece of gear for that package for $19,000, someone's desperate and comes along and will pay full price. But unfortunately, you don't have any more gear. So we looked over 3 years, and we could see that we always had 4 shows. So these guys who are very successful today and were very successful then and are risk takers, they bit the bullet and they started turning down those low-end, those low-ball jobs. And sure enough, right at the end, right when it looked like we weren't going to rent that 4th set of gear, someone came in and paid a full price. So part of it is just knowing your business and knowing what you have. Also having the courage to stand by your beliefs and what you think you're worth. It's very easy to panic over these things. And again, I'm not a fool. If you need the money to pay your rent and to pay your staff on Friday, you take the business, okay? But if you have an overall vision of what your business is and what it's worth, you should not be taking lowball jobs. You don't have goods to sell. You have your intellectual creativity to sell. And it's tempting to say, well, I'm not doing anything right now, so I can put my staff to work. But invariably, in my experience, as soon as you do that for low money, you get a call from General Motors saying, can you do this job? And the fact is you can't, because now your staff is tied up doing a low-end job, and you're kind of screwed. So we're going to talk later about fear and how you overcome it specifically, but part of it is the more information you have about yourself and your market and what you can do, the better you can withstand these people that lowball you. Your bid, if people are legitimate, you might be 10% different than the other people, but not much more than that. So anyone who comes in with you that comes to you and says, well, I'm going to pay 30% less, you say what Meyer said, go ahead. I would do that too if I were you. But the reality is they're not getting your quality for 30% less. I assure you of that. I assure you of that.